thank you so much for joining me for this next episode in my series of last lectures and class presentations. Today, we're going to talk about why it's the case that recent presidential campaigns have become so rancorous and acrimonious. Since the beginning of the Republic, U.S. presidential campaigns have been untidy affairs. Many Americans, particularly those who have seen Lin-Manuel Miranda's feisty underdog of a musical, Hamilton, are familiar with the nasty piece of business that was the 1800 presidential campaign, when surrogates for John Adams and Thomas Jefferson lobbed the most vile charges at each candidate. It would be, however, inaccurate to claim that the rancor that has dominated recent presidential contests is simply a same as it ever was phenomenon. Presidential campaigns in the early years of the Republic were certainly high-spirited because each side thought that the other side posed a clear and present danger to the success of the American experiment. There was not a tradition in the U.S. or elsewhere of, quote, the peaceful transfer of power from a governing regime to its opponents. Bullets rather than ballots were the instruments of succession during this time. The acceptance of party competition as legitimate and even necessary in the mid-19th century lowered the temperature of presidential campaigns. This is not to say that we have not had some fiery campaigns since that period. The heated rhetoric of the 2016 and 2020 campaigns, however, seemed to suggest to many commentators that the yawning gap separating the two parties will give us presidential campaigns for the foreseeable future that will wallow in the muck and the mire. What political scientists call partisan polarization, or the sorting of the two parties' supporters into antithetical ideological camps, is indisputably a key driver of the increasing negativity in our presidential campaigns. The intrusion of social media and the disinformation that can be readily spread on these platforms is another important factor. There has also been, however, a less discussed, but to my mind at least, equally important change in how campaign professionals run campaigns that has made recent campaigns especially acrimonious. As recently as the late 20th century, presidential campaigns sought to build broad coalitions of voters. Even in the notorious 1988 campaign, in which George H.W. Bush, at the direction of his chief campaign strategist, Lee Atwater, turned the contest into a debate over whether his opponent, Michael Dukakis, was truly unpatriotic, a coddler of murderers, and a polluter, the mostly baseless charges generated by the Bush campaign were designed to define Dukakis in a way that would prompt Democrats and independents to coalesce around Bush. As campaign strategists have become more skillful at using publicly available personal data to, quote, micro-target small groups of voters that are already inclined to support their candidate, fewer campaigns have seen the upside of building a big tent coalition. They instead tend to cater to small groups of so-called policy demanders or activists who are energized when their standard bearer takes a meat axe to the candidate of the other party. Political strategists' harnessing of so-called big data is making our presidential campaigns more narrowly focused, more adversarial, and more committed to mobilization than to persuasion. This trend, alas, is more likely to accelerate than to be reversed. As campaigns become more adroit at using frontier technologies such as generative AI, the techniques for misleading the electorate will become more varied and more seductive. Third parties unaffiliated with the two campaigns, whether they be super PACs or foreign governments, will also become more adept and aggressive in using these technologies to cause Americans to become even more suspicious of the motives and designs of those in the other party. Donald Trump's 2016 and 2020 campaigns certainly did nothing to ameliorate the effects of these new technologies and the scorched earth mentality they engender. They will, however, continue to contaminate our politics after Trump shuffles off the campaign coil. Thank you again for joining me for this installment of my last series of lectures and classes. I hope to see you next time. This is Ron Seyb. Goodbye.